repeat the non-conformist oath. I promise to be different. I promise to be unique. I promise not to repeat things other people say.
Welcome back to Positive Blatherings, and this episode is kind of an impromptu video, so forgive me if it's all messed up. It won't be, but sometimes so today I was not feeling very positive, and I'm thinking I have to do this episode for many reasons. And then I decided, well, all right, so I'll make myself feel better by not doing video. And then I got an even better mood. And so I decided I didn't want to shortchange this guest. James Christopher Knight is my guest today, and he's an artist and photographer and Rochester native who left and came back and has a really interesting story, and I'm eager to learn all about it. And I really appreciate you bringing your positive energy into this space today, because it was sorely needed, and I was desperate for it. I didn't realize it until you walked in. You walked in, and I'll put it in after, but you brought me this amazing photograph of the Freddie Sue Bridge in downtown Rochester. It's like the iconic photo that I've always wanted to have in here, and I have a painting from Anthony Caruso in there, which you recognized, which was pretty cool. Shout out to Anthony there. So thank you for being here and coming to share your story. I really appreciate it.
For sure, and thanks for having me. I think it was Anthony who I saw or heard on your podcast.
Ah, yes.
And just thought, I mean, I'm brand new back in Rochester, so I don't know everything that's here. And when I found you, Rockvox, and what was happening, I thought that was cool, and reached out just to see if there was something we could connect with. So I dig that you are sharing something very positive with people too.
Yeah. I mean, that was like we were talking off the mic earlier. That was kind of like the whole reason why I started doing this podcast, was to become a better listener and to also put myself into contact with the more people who were doing positive things in the world, who were making their destinies, and using the principles that I've read about all these years, but never really applied to my everyday life. If you read Think and Grow Rich and then The Millionaire Next Door and all these self-help guru books, they all have little nuggets of just perfect truth in them. But a lot of times it takes a little work to make them work for you.
Yeah, the implementation is huge.
So how long were you gone from Rochester?
20 years, I think.
Wow.
I'm really bad, by the way, at remembering dates that things happened on. I remember the sequence of events. So
not a politician, are you?
Yeah, I wish. Or not, I guess. I've never been into politics. But I left for college straight out of high school, went to Boston for college, and then straight from college to Los Angeles. And spent, I think, about 20 years on the West Coast before coming back to Rochester.
Wow.
And it wasn't a straight shot back. I mean, it was Los Angeles to Paris. My wife is French, and she's from Paris. So we moved to Paris and then back to California, this time to Santa Barbara, where I worked for 2 years as an estate manager, totally off the path that I had ever been on, but interesting nonetheless. And then when that ended, I went back to Paris. And then we had a baby and came back to Rochester. So there's been a lot of bouncing around.
Wow, but it's a heck of a bounce.
Yeah.
That's, you're talking major moving.
Yeah.
So, I know what it was like moving back and forth from South Florida to Rochester 3 or 4 times, but to Paris?
Yeah. So I've always been a traveler. I think on one hand, it is a bit of distraction. Mm-hmm. Sometimes travel like that, looking for the next most interesting thing, I felt like in some ways, not moving to Paris because that was amazing. I did that for my wife, but moving around prior to that in my life was the next most interesting thing, but didn't lead me further down a path that I wanted to go. But then again, who knows what you stumble upon as you just drift through the world. Maybe we don't have to be on a perfect path. I certainly never took one. I literally always just did the next most interesting thing, for better or for worse.
That's interesting because it kind of flies in the face of what we're sort of brought up to believe for most of us. You there's a path. You have this path. You go to school, then you go to college, or you learn a trade, and then you start working, and then you have a family. And, you know, I mean, that's kind of like what a lot of people are sort of laid out to follow. But you went...
I did.
So what brought you out to LA, first of all? Because that's got... So you went from Rochester to Boston, you went to school in Boston, and then... So that's like a complete flip of realities there, going out there.
It is. And, you know, my grandfather lived in California when I was growing up. We would visit him, and I always loved it. I mean, I'm 45. I watched a lot of 80s movies, you know, growing up. And a lot of them came out of and were set in California.
Right.
So I always fantasize. I drove to California from Rochester in a red Ford Explorer with surf stickers on the back. I had never surfed except for once on vacation in Hawaii. So it was always a fantasy. It was always a dream. I was interested in the arts. I was interested in communication, whether it was radio, film, broadcasting, something like that. I went to Emerson College in Boston, studied filmmaking. And so the next logical transition was to either New York or Los Angeles. And I remember the year before I graduated, calling friends who had graduated ahead of me. Some went to New York, some went to Los Angeles. My friends in New York were freezing in the winter, living 5 guys in one tiny apartment.
Right.
And then I called my friends in California, and they were like, come on out, we're having a party. We got this big house in the valley, still 5 guys, but in a big house with a pool and wearing shorts and tank tops in the winter. So that made my decision clear. And I went out west, and I took 2 internships right away. So this touches on your idea of the path that we're supposed to follow, or that we're taught to follow, rather. A lot of the people that did what I did in college went out to Los Angeles and then started as assistants. If they wanted to work in production, they would be an assistant to a director or something like that. I had an internship at Columbia Pictures and was offered a job as an assistant to one of the executives, but I turned it down. I was also an intern for Bunim Productions, which at the time was doing Road Rules and Real World. And I was offered a job like, I don't know, being a gopher, and I turned that down too. I really wanted to be a rock star. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. So I dropped the path that I had set out on and became a waiter in Los Angeles and played in rock bands at night.
Okay. So what's your instrument?
Piano, mostly.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and it was great. I loved it. I mean, there wasn't much of a future in that, but it was a lot of fun.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you were playing all throughout your childhood, or when you were older you started playing?
Yeah, I grew up playing piano. I mean, the stuff you learn with, you know, your piano teacher, the classical stuff. Really didn't have a lot of interest in that until later. Now I'm sort of obsessed with Satie and some of the classic, you know, piano artists. But I just wanted to be on a stage in front of thousands of fans, touring around the world, partying. I mean, that's changed a lot for me these days. But at the time, that was the dream. I love the idea of a band like U2, this brotherhood. They're all from the same neighborhood,
right? And
then they took on the world with their art.
I had a similar dream. I will share that with
Please.
you. And this was in the early to mid 90s. I was trying to go to college and unsuccessfully so. Played guitar in an avant-garde band.
Okay.
And we met some guy who claimed to be with RCA BMG, and he was going to sign us, and he it was all this. It was bullshit. Sadly. And most of the guys were pretty leery of him, and I was like, no, this is it. We're going to do it. And it was a horrible wake up call. But going back to those times in the mid 90s and stuff, it was a lot of fun to be playing in bands and that kind of thing. And I was that's what I wanted to do. And then I realized and I hate to have hate to have regrets. I hate to talk about my regrets, but that's looking back. I'm like, man, I really wish I would have put more effort into my schooling and stopped, with the starry eyes and stuff like that. But there's so many experiences that I had also that I'd never want to, lose. So
sure,
it's a tough road to travel. So, hats off to you for you were out in LA. So it's like, if that's where you got to be.
It was a fun place to be to do it. I mean, the Sunset Strip, I arrived just before it all changed. I mean, I went to school for filmmaking just before it all changed, too. I mean, when I went to, I think you're a filmmaker, right? Mm-hmm. So film school for me was shooting on a Bolex film and then splicing it, literally cutting film with a razor blade and taping it back together. I mean, 5 years later, I went back to the school to visit, and it was a whole different world.
Like film? What's that?
Yeah, exactly. A professor recently told me that I studied with when I was there that they no longer teach lighting the way I learned lighting, or you would have, back then too. They just teach students how to get the shot right, and then how to edit it in post. You can
really
change lighting. Yeah. And he's no
That's
longer
kind of weird
teaching at that school. But I was able to get in contact with him and said, what's it like these days? What are kids learning? Said they're not teaching standard lighting the way they used to.
What about mood? I mean, lighting is such a huge tool for that.
It can be manipulated in post.
Oh, no, no.
Yeah.
Fix it in post. That's like,
I know.
No, you don't do that. So for me, I like being a director, a producer director, and hiring a DP and hiring a gaffer that will, this is what I want to do. And they go, okay, let's do this. And we'll put the light there, because I learned all the basic 3-point lighting stuff for lighting interviews and things like that. But never went into, the depths of how to light a scene for a noir, scene or, any of that stuff. So I depend, I surround myself with people who know better than I do. You do it.
And that's a talent, being able to pull together the crew that can, create your vision.
Right.
Yeah. I forgot what we were saying about I lost a train of thought on that.
We were talking about being, trying to be a rock star out in LA.
Right. Yeah,
so did you play at like Whiskey A Go-Go and stuff like that?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Key Club. My favorite club back then, and I don't think it's there anymore, it's called The Gig. It's on Melrose, or was on Melrose
I've
Boulevard.
heard of that place.
Yeah, that was so much fun. I used to play there maybe once a week, had a show there. It was great. I loved that spot. Yeah, it was fun, and I loved it back then. I loved the brotherhood.
What years were you talking about?
I arrived in late 99, so early 2000s.
Okay.
I mean, even then, there was no YouTube. We would stand outside of places and hand out flyers.
Yeah, that's just on the cusp. That's just on the cusp. I know.
Yeah.
I know from, when we were doing it in the 90s, it was like, putting cassette tapes together, and CDs weren't even around. It was like, to burn a CD was like this big deal.
Yeah, totally.
Now no one even uses CDs anymore.
No, that was it. It was the tail end. It was the very end of what had lasted more than a decade, the cassette decade.
Yeah.
Right? Like the 80s, but that started, I think, in the 70s.
Yeah, the late 70s.
So maybe that's 2 decades worth of cassettes.
Yep.
And then it was CDs for a fairly short time, actually, right? 10 years
yeah,
CDs
not
before moving on to
now
MP3
everyone's
players.
going back to vinyl.
Yeah, which I love. I love seeing that because I miss going to the old record stores. House of Guitars. Yep. They still have a massive vinyl section, right?
Yep.
I haven't been there in a while, but
Record Archive too is the other place.
Okay.
They've got that place is awesome.
Yeah, very cool.
A lot of these posters I got from Record Archive.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So, filmmaking. You make narrative films, right?
So I've produced one feature film that was written by a friend of mine. He wrote the script a long time ago, and then we kind of refreshed it and co-wrote some scenes to change it a little bit. And it was one of those things where, and I guess it was kind of like your idea of this is what I want to do. We decided we needed to make a film before we were too old to make a film.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we didn't want to be those guys that were all, angry at the world because we never got to follow our dreams. So it was like, we're going to do this. And I'm sure you know that the worst part about filmmaking is the raising of the funds to make the movie.
Right. Yeah.
Because everything else is considerably easier.
Yeah.
So we ended up self-funding it.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it was just a matter of we have to do this, so we're going to do this. And I made a bunch of shorts too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Do you show them? Did you play them in theaters here?
Yeah. So Bottom Feeders is our feature comedy. It's on Prime right now and a couple of other platforms so you can still watch it. And then all my other shorts they were in, like they might still have it. It was called Mind to Movie, and it was like a 48-hour movie making competition. Maybe it was 72 hours. I can't remember. So it was like on the kickoff day, they give you 3 items, you pull your team together, you write a script, you go out and shoot it, and everything from editing to the score and everything, and you have to have it turned in at a certain time, and then they play it at the theater. It was pretty cool.
Okay.
It was a lot of fun because it was a lot of learning.
For sure.
And teamwork.
Yeah, and having to pull it off that quickly is a feat. So as a director, you're probably really into story.
Yeah.
Okay. How much of you do you find in the stories that you're creating?
Well, so in the stuff that I've written, there's a lot of me in it, and I really haven't. There's only one of the films that I created was a short film called Step 9 that that is. I don't want to say autobiographical, but it has a lot of me in it. But here's the problem that I have is that I haven't been able to completely write a screenplay for a story, like the entire thing. I'd get 20 pages in and get discouraged or write myself into a corner. And so there's where I have a problem. If I'm on a group, if I'm like in a collaborative effort and I'm helping someone write, I'm great like that.
Okay.
Like, hey, I need help with dialogue, or I need help with this, help me punch this script up. That's me. But I sit down and say, I'm going to write a film, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. I've always told friends just finishing a screenplay.
Oh, it's huge.
Is amazing. Yeah. And it's something to be congratulated for or to celebrate. Part of the reason why I ask you is because we're talking about being positive, and I love your mission with having this podcast to put yourself around people that can share those perspectives with you. One thing that I've wondered about, because I've written screenplays as well, is, or like you were talking about, not feeling great today. How much do we focus on being negative as an acknowledgement of what is, sort of the reality that is there, to then transcend it, to go beyond it, versus not looking at it. And so if someone is writing
and ignoring it.
Yeah, because I see that happen a lot. People are afraid to say something negative or afraid to admit something because they're trying so hard to be positive.
Yeah.
What I find is then that negativity can fester underneath the surface.
Absolutely.
And I've found art, in particular screenwriting, a great way to let that out. And it gives me perspective if I'm writing a screenplay that I know that one character, and usually all of them in some way, but let's just take one key character, is really experiencing the things either I want to experience but have too much judgment to admit or say out loud, or they're going through something. I usually recognize after I've written the character or the screenplay. I find that when I look back at that character, that I was wrestling with something that became part of that character's trait, and it helped me to see it and figure it out. But it was only through allowing myself to admit the negativity or admit the struggle that was there that I could actually handle it and move past it. So I was just wondering, for you, do you have some experience in writing where it's almost cathartic in that way?
Oh yeah, writing's very cathartic for me.
Okay.
If we get into the whole, well, I haven't finished a script yet, is immaterial, because I have tons and tons of passages, and just if I'm really, really down or something's really, really bothering me, I tend to like to write whatever it is. A short story that is of no consequence to anything, whatever. but I have to write it down, even if it's at the very least like a journal entry. And the thing is that I'm so inconsistent. I haven't. Some people, I'm amazed. Like I'm really big into audiobooks, right? I'm listening to Prince Harry's audiobook Spare.
Oh, okay.
And I'm just thoroughly amazed about anyone that can write a memoir. Because if you ask me to tell me about your 20s,
right,
I'd be lucky if I could fill 5 minutes.
Yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
and go back even further. When I was a kid, I remember a day. You know, from the time I was born to 19, I remember like 2 days. So anybody that can do that can write a memoir. But so that whole idea of sitting down, writing for your own needs to help you get through something, I'm a big fan of that, and sometimes I wish I were better at it. I wish I were better at committing to it. Sometimes I get like ADD kind of thing, and I'll go off and like, oh, something shiny. Let's do this for a while. Let's do that. You know?
Yeah. No, I have that too. Maybe Prince Harry. That's his name, right? Prince Harry. Maybe he used ChatGPT to write the memoir. I'm kidding.
What's that?
ChatGPT. Have you played with that yet? Oh, the AI. Sorry about this. I should have turned that thing on silent. I was trying to do it in my pocket, but I wasn't successful. Okay, there we go. If you haven't played with the AI thing called ChatGPT, it's incredible, and it will write a book for you if you want to.
You know what? I think I just saw something about that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Really?
It's incredible, and it's a look at our future.
You start bringing in, start talking about AI, and then that's when things go south with me. Seriously, because I'm looking at the AI technology, and I'm watching most of what I do go away.
Right. Okay. I see. I see why you say that.
You know what I mean? And like this morning I saw they AI created some. It was like vintage photographs of a house party that they created out of AI. So these people aren't real, but they were showing how AI like has problems with mouths, and it has problems with. So it's like some of the characters had like 7 fingers. Another woman was smiling and she had way too many teeth. But if you glance, you're like, oh wow, that looks like a picture from the 70s.
Right.
But then you look at it, you're like, what? That's so weird. But they can do all that kind of stuff.
It's going to get better. I mean, even as a photographer, that is an interesting question. But I think every time a new technology has come along, take fast food, for example. When it came out, there are newspaper articles that I've seen, and not too long ago, from that time that were stating this is going to be the death of gourmet food. But it wasn't. Gourmet food was sought after because it was harder to find, or the quality of something that was homemade or handmade became more valuable.
Right.
So hopefully that happens here too. I mean, I wonder if YouTube will get flooded with bots.
Well, I mean, look at what's going on with TikTok. Have you seen the deep fakes that are on TikTok?
No.
There's a couple that I find hilarious where they just take Arnold Schwarzenegger and put him on every scene in every movie.
Okay.
And he plays every character, which is hilarious. But at the same time, and there's one guy who does all these videos, and you would bet money that it's Tom Cruise.
Amazing.
It's not Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because the deepfake technology is so good, and that's the kind of stuff that scares me, because using that amazing technology for bad is so powerful. Now there's these other, going to like my fear, there's these AI voiceovers. Yeah. In multiple languages, and it's like, hey, for $8 you can have an AI guy with a pretty decent voice your project, rather than spending $1,000 on a professional voice talent.
Right. And so what happens? I mean, not in the next year, but 10 years from now, when that technology is so much better. And I wonder. I mean, right now you can tell the difference, and there's a warmth to the human voice. There's tonality. Yeah,
and it's something that's really hard to place too. It's just that. I don't know. It's like our innate ability to detect other humans or something. I wish it was that good. But yeah.
Well, it's the difference between, since you play music, I'm sure you've recorded and had the computer put everything in tight time.
Yeah.
But it misses that human
right.
feel that is a little bit out of the pocket sometimes.
Yeah.
And just, I think they call it the uncanny valley when it comes to looking at AI technology or looking at bots. But maybe it gets so good that it has that feeling. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with it. But
I have a domain called hirehuman.org.
That's good.
I just got it one day. I was like, I had this argument, or not argument. I had this discussion about AI voiceovers, and I'm like, and I kept writing hire human, like in the comments, hire human, hire human. And then I started thinking about the movies, like, what is it, Terminator, and all these sort of dystopic movies about people and the fight from the robots and AI against humans and stuff. And I'm like, that'd be a great little nonprofit to have, like hirehuman.org. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with it. But
it's a great name.
Maybe at the very least, I'll sell it to someone who can actually really do something with it.
Yeah. Or maybe you take your voice and you create various bots all with your voice.
I would love to do that. I would absolutely love to do that. That is just way out of my pay grade.
Right. I said it, but I wouldn't know how to start it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what's coming, but I'm hopeful. And I don't know why, except that humans have persevered through so many things. Maybe this is just the darkness before the dawn. When the tractor was invented, people thought that was going to kill jobs. People thought that books were going to be the death of communication. There were people that thought that books were the devil's work.
Right.
So
there are still people that think that
they burned some of them. Yeah. So, I don't know. I'm hopeful.
No, it's interesting. And I love that perspective of optimism. It's really great because you can really fall down a rabbit hole of negativity and fear with all the stuff that happens. And it's refreshing to have someone be like, no. And I've had these conversations with other people before. They're like, you have to look at it differently. This is this could be a great new world of what, you never know what can happen. And it's true. Mm-hmm. It's true. But I think just as a human being, we're wired. We're just wired to look for the threat.
Right. We are. Yeah.
And that's hard to overcome.
Yeah. And so I think going back to what you were saying in the beginning about studying some of the teachers who have taught us how to think and how to be more positive. One of the things that's been really helpful for me is studying cognitive biases. Once you can see the mechanisms of the mind and how they work, you're not beholden to it in the same way that you were beforehand. And so an example of that is this wiring that you're talking about. We're wired to look for the negative. So if you can meditate on that and or not you personally, but just if one can meditate on that, you can separate yourself from the hold that has on you. And then, at least for me, I arrive at a place where I say something like, okay, well, I can't do anything about this technology coming. It's coming no matter what. So now I'm going to quote Jack Sparrow. The problem is not the problem. The problem is your attitude about the problem, which is what I want to tell a lot of people in Rochester when they complain about winter. Cognitive biases, that's been a fascinating study. And to that end, I remember listening to a guy named Brett Weinstein talking to his brother. Can't remember his first name. Anyway, let's just call them the Weinstein brothers. And they were talking about how in mating, one of them said to the other who is married, if you know that we're genetically wired to just sow our seeds, as much as we can, why stay married? And that guy's response was, once you know how it works, do you still want to play the game? And that one quote has stayed with me, because when I understand how something works, whatever that is, and in this case, I'm applying it to the human mind, then I think you have a better chance of choosing something different. There's like an enlightenment, so to speak, not the grand enlightenment, but little mini enlightenments that we go through. You go, oh, that's interesting. That's probably why I think this, or that's why I'm driven to do this thing. And from that place, at least for me, I find I can make a change and take it in a different direction if I want to. And sometimes it's still, going against the grain. I think somebody who helped me with one particular aspect of my life in that way, and that's Annie Grace.
Oh,
great book.
Absolutely.
And a wonderful woman. I don't know her personally, but just from what
I
I've
had
seen
her on
in
the podcast. I was fortunate enough to.
Did you really?
Yeah, I reached out and somehow got her. Amazing. I got through all her assistants and I got her, and she was on the podcast, and then we talked about it. I talked about her, wow. Yeah. Holy crap. Sorry. Total brain fart.
It's all right. It's happened to me ever since I got COVID, actually.
What the hell's the name of the book? This Naked Mind. This Naked Mind. Yeah. Whew. Oh my goodness. That was real tough. Let me go back. From the book, her book, This Naked Mind, when I was able to get her on the show to talk about that, because that, and this is almost exactly what you're talking about. It was, I saw the strings, right, all around alcohol, around how there's this stigma, how there's just this whole life that it has, that we don't have to play that game.
Right. Yeah. That's a perfect example of that.
It's exactly what happened for me. I was like, okay, so, and she does it in the book where she completely breaks it down. She's like, all right, so you get this feeling when you drink, and it lasts about 8 minutes, or maybe 9 minutes, 10 minutes tops. And then it starts to go away. And then you want to drink more to get that feeling back, but it's never coming back the way you had it. And now things are worse. And so when you boil it all down, and then all these things happen, and then, it snowballs from there, then you think about it and you go, why the hell am I going to put myself through? First of all, it tastes terrible. I've trained myself to think that I like it. And I'm going to put myself through all of this crap for 6 minutes? 6 minutes of, no. Find another way to get that feeling, a better way. That and the marketing and...
There's so much behind that, yeah.
That's so awesome, though.
Yeah. So for full transparency, I have not quit drinking, but I also was never a heavy drinker. I didn't do it for many years of my life. More out of habit, I would say, than addiction for me. It was just I was in places where people were doing it a lot.
Yep.
But I've cut it back to where it's just a weekend thing, and even then, I'll have one and put it down. And I may end up as a person who doesn't drink at all, because and the book is still having that effect on me. Even when I go to have one today, and I don't mean today, Tuesday, or whatever, Monday. If I go to have one, I still ask myself that question, and sometimes I put it back.
Like, why?
So it's probably going to have a lingering effect on me over time. But I've given that book to so many people who actually had substantial issues. Like it was impacting their life in a very negative way. And I can tell you 5 people at least who have quit entirely because of that book. So when a friend of mine recommended it, I said, I don't drink that much, but he said, just take a listen. Like, you may not want to drink at all after this. And I listened to the audio, and sure enough, it really cut. Like, that's when I went from whatever I was doing, which, I don't know, 5 days a week, down to just the weekends, and now really just down to maybe Friday night. But I would like to attempt not drinking at all. But the people I know who are having an issue with it, where it was impacting their life very negatively, have gone, totally sober and are loving it. And I think that's the biggest thing. I appreciate AA and what it's done for friends of mine that I know. But I also witnessed a lot of friends struggle with a lot of guilt and judgment going through that program.
Yeah.
And it was a couple of those friends that I gave this book to who made a very, quote, easy transition,
Yeah.
like a joyful transition. They weren't in resistance.
Yeah, and that's, I think resistance is the key word there. That is exactly what happened to me. I was going to AA, and I don't want to say anything bad about it. If it works for you, then that's great. Do more of that. But that was the problem, is that what I saw when I went to those meetings was a bunch of people who can't function without their AA meetings. And I said, I don't want this for myself. I just don't want to do that. And I have to figure out why I was doing that. And once I figured it out, just like you said, I saw the strings, I figured out the game and how it was played, and I was like, I don't want to play it anymore. And I was fortunate that I could do that. There's a lot of people who can't. And I think for me, it was less of a physical addiction and more of a mental health issue and more of me coping with whatever I was going through and not finding the right coping skills. That and growing up Irish.
That's the main problem, right? That does it. Yeah, my Italian heritage. It was wine.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When you're the kids, you're drinking. Can I have a sip of your wine? And,
yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, and my wife is French. I mean, talk about wine culture.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you heard of a guy named Dr. Gabor Mate?
No.
Very interesting. His work is astounding. He deals a lot with addiction. And one of the things that he says is that people are self-medicating. I mean, that alone, that statement isn't groundbreaking, but go deep in his work and you're going to find, I had a lot of aha moments reading his work. Very fascinating guy. But this idea that we're self-medicating, there's something going on that you're fixing when you or anyone, the informal you, when one goes to grab a drink or any drug. And I did my share of drugs in Los Angeles. Luckily, I mean, in my 20s when I was playing in rock bands, that's one of the reasons why I was very happy to leave it behind. It's interesting to me today, standing where I stand at 45 with a young son, thinking back to my 20s and what I aspired to. Part of that fantasy of being a rock star was having the opportunity to be with different women and do a lot of drugs. Right. And cut to several years later, and somehow that's just not interesting anymore. And I wish there was a way to teach. I'm thinking about my young son when he's of age to be taught such things, because I don't think I could have been convinced. There's a line in a Goo Goo Dolls song, "Don't tell me how it feels, I want to find out on my own." I think that was me. I had to journey the journey.
Yeah.
But I wish I would have known that what I wanted wouldn't be interesting in 10 years.
Yeah.
There's just something about what the youthful, lustful mind and heart might be after. I mean, I also went through, I disappeared for a while into an ashram in Oregon, studied meditation and, things like that for a period of time. And that really had an effect on me. That changed me in a positive way.
Yeah.
But I didn't know those things at 20. I was on fire. Nobody could tell me what to do.
So meditation, I guess, is a big part of your life now.
It is, and I want to practice with it more. I mean, I was practicing, meaning sitting down, meditating, an hour a day at least for many years. Yeah. Today, I'm more in a build and create and workflow, but maybe it's like inertia, or you build something enough, and it seeps into. At least I find it seeps into my life. Even if I don't sit down to properly, hands on my knees, meditate, it's part of my process. It happens when I'm walking. It absolutely happens when I'm photographing. Yeah,
that's very interesting, and it just reminds me of, there was a time not too long ago where meditation was my everyday. I had to make sure that I took at least 5 minutes, usually 15, sometimes 30, to sit and meditate, and not take a nap, but actually meditate on clearing my mind and focus on my breathing and not think, and to quiet my mind, which is really, really hard, which I'm sure you know. And when there were days that I didn't meditate, I was able to sort of recall that feeling when things were going rough. I could recall that feeling of, for lack of a better word, zen that I was in. And I could sort of grasp onto it a little bit and say, yeah. All right, let's go back to that spot for a second and then continue on without having to sit down and meditate. So, doing something on a regular basis and having, like you said, seep into your life, to your everyday, that's huge. And I have to aspire to do that again, because that's the biggest. If I had one complaint about me, it's that I just never stick with stuff that's good for me.
Right. Yeah.
Exercise, nutrition, meditation, positive, gratitude, all of these things that some people are just focused on every day. It is part of their checklist.
Right.
And I get that. Yeah, it's part of my checklist. And then, one day it's not part of my checklist, and then hasn't been a part of my checklist for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then it's 3 years. And it's like, man, can I please just stick with something?
Yeah. I'm challenged in the same way. I'm just not good at it. But in a way, I've given up on it. And that's not to say there's certain things. I want to make sure I drink enough water. Waking up and meditating is fantastic. I would love to put that back into my day because I'm not currently doing that. But I also, for me, I subscribe to what could be called the tantric path, and that's not a sexual thing. It's the path. It's opposite of the sort of the very Zen path. The yogi who goes up to the top of the mountain, eats a grain of rice a day,
right,
and gets rid of the rest of the world to find enlightenment. What's always appealed to me, and I'm sure to you too, since we're people who like to taste life in all the ways that we have, is the tantric path, which is going towards all of life, doing your life, doing the things that you imagine doing or dream of doing, but doing them consciously. And it's that being present, going through an experience that I find illuminating. Even if it's a really negative experience, to go through it with your eyes wide open could mean that there is so much more learned than going through it blindly. And maybe you never have to experience that again. We tend to have patterns that repeat over and over again. I believe that happens because we go through them unconsciously. But if we go through those same experiences, feeling all of the feelings, and feeling doesn't necessarily mean demonstrating it like, I'm angry. Anger could look like a yogi sitting still meditating, feeling the feeling, letting it move from within myself, releases something, and asking myself what. I love that question. If I sit and ask what, even if I'm photographing, tying this back to art a little bit, if I'm looking at the Freddie Sue Bridge and I'm saying, what do I feel? What is here? What is present for me? Or if I'm speaking with someone, what am I feeling? In the presence of this person or in the presence of this scene, this bridge, it moves in a very organic way. It doesn't necessarily come as a thought, but it comes as a feeling. And as an artist, I might try to find a way to put that into words to communicate it. Or I believe, I can't prove this, but I believe it becomes part of the art created. So Anthony, when he's painting, the energy or the state that he's in becomes part of that painting. When you're reading a voiceover, the medium somehow captures the energy, right, through all of this. I'm sure you can listen back to your voice and you just like, God, I just don't sound right today. Or there's something in my voice in that recording that is beautiful. And I think that's that thing coming through us. And by thing, I'm referring to that timeless experience, maybe the place that we all come from, whatever someone believes that is. If we open up and let that come through. And I think that's what meditation can help us with.
Yeah, that you're reminding me of back when I played music. There was a place that I got to when I played music that I could hear it. I could experience it every time I heard that piece, whatever it was I recorded. I could remember what place I was in when it was recorded. And now that I don't really play music that much, I kind of miss that. I miss getting into that zone and that sort of. It's interesting. And
you played in a band, so you played with other people too.
Yeah.
Then you have that cohesion of multiple people, and when you start to vibe on that same wavelength, that's amazing, right?
I play. My son is a musician. He's going to school to be a music teacher.
Awesome.
And he's a trombone player, but he plays like me. He plays whatever he can get his hands on. So we were sitting in the basement, and he started just playing a couple of riffs on his bass, and I took out the guitar and just started, we started jamming for, 15, 20 minutes. And one, it reminded me of how terribly out of practice I am, but two, it was just amazing. I was like, that was the most fun I've had, and I can't remember when.
Yeah, what a cool experience to have with your son.
Yeah, and he loved it too. And he's like, we got to do this more, and that's something that we want to try to do more often. And I get frustrated because I'm like, I really want to, there's so much more I want to do, but I can't do it. I got to practice. I got to get back into it,
Yeah.
But that was so much fun to get into that spot.
Right.
Do you find that when you're doing your photography, do you get into that zone where it's like, this, it's me and this, and I'm...
Yeah, it happens, I would say, most with people. So in portrait sessions, I can have that experience. I have it with things. So if I'm walking, let's say, I recently shot High Falls, and I stop, and there's something about the beauty, the majesty of this, and it's as if for a moment, just there's this fleeting moment of just the beauty, no name for it, just, wow, this is amazing. And that's what I try to vibe with when I start to photograph it. So what is that thing? And how do I put that in presentational form to share with other people? So like the one that you have now in the lobby there, it's a bit of a fantasy. I mean, I've been accused of photoshopping that one, and I have not really, other than taking out a couple distracting elements. That is what that bridge looked like on that day when I was there. But color tone, these are choices that artists make, right? Color tone, warmth, time of day that you go. That was shot at the blue hour. So we have this beautiful blue hue to the sky, and then the lights are all on. Right, you can go at night and it's black, but this beautiful blue just after sundown, when all the lights are on in the city, it gives it an iconic, glowing feel. But that's how I feel when I'm there. So that's why that choice was made. But I absolutely have never found something other than acting where I've gelled with another group of people in the same way that I did when I was playing music in Los Angeles. Yeah. And I remember everything else fell away. Like I didn't know what gender or nationality or ethnicity somebody was. Like it all falls away, and they were the sound of their bass, or they were the sound of the drums. And I loved relating to people through that artistic vibe versus the individual who, has a conversation. We go out to dinner afterwards. That's great too. And they were wonderful friends. But I've played with all kinds of people. And when we were playing in a room together, it was the music that was most important, not who any individual is as a person.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, that mask falls away.
I know, and with the acting part too, I've done some acting, and I actually a couple of years ago directed a readers theater, and I played a part in it, and it was a completely eye-opening experience for me because I've never done theater, and then I just kind of like grabbed onto this project and became the director, and then also was doing a part. But that cohesion with the cast, with the whole crew, with everybody that's involved, and that oneness is really it made me really understand why some people devote their lives even to doing community theater where they're not getting paid, and it's all in their spare time. But for that moment where everything clicks and that the audience loves it and you've reached them, and there's everybody's sharing that emotion. Yeah, it's really indescribable.
Did you find that mostly as an actor? Did you find that as a director too?
Yeah, both. Okay. Both. It was really fun.
Yeah. I haven't done a lot of directing, but I could imagine how you can get there. I mean, it's obvious as an actor. And I remember the first time I really felt the world change. I was working with a woman who was playing the role of my sister in this scene. And I literally thought she was my sister. And I remember coming out of that space and thinking that was amazing. I just lived another life. I got to experience something that I'd never experienced, which was whatever was happening in the scene. I don't remember that. But what I remembered was this palpable feeling of, I love you like my sister. Like, and it was amazing. And once I felt that, I was totally hooked. And yeah.
So are you doing more acting now, or are you looking to do more acting, or is it just something?
Yeah. You know, it's, I would do it, but like music, it takes so much time and energy. And I'm now building a couple new businesses and projects that are taking the bulk of my time. So maybe after these get stabilized, I'll go back to that.
Perfect segue. So what are you working on now?
Unplanned, by the way. So I'm continuing to photograph around Rochester here, and I'm selling those prints. I had a business for many years when I was out in California selling oil paintings, and I tried my hand at abstract painting. I was able to sell them because I was a decent salesperson, but not because I was a great abstract painter. I'll leave that to the Anthony Carusos of the world, the painting. So that turned into selling photographs, and I still continue to do that. But my newest project that I'm most excited about is called Paris Love Affair, and it's all things Paris seen through my eyes. And I want to attract people who want to go to Paris, people who fantasize about it, people who dream of this iconic city, which is amazing. And I love it. My wife and I have lived there and will be living there again, probably splitting time between here and Paris. And I found a Paris when we started dating that was not in the books. It's not what you see as a tourist. And I fell in love with that Paris. I fell in love with being alone in Paris, walking home at night, and it's a very safe city, so you can do this, through cobbled streets that are desolate. And there was such a peace to that city. I love being in the soup of the city, leaving the door of my apartment when I'm there, and being in the mix of this vibe that's happening with all the other people who are part of Paris. The art that moves through there, it's a meeting center for the world, and I would love to help young kids, teenagers, get to Paris or other parts of Europe who might not otherwise have the opportunity. So a huge component of this project will be donating money to a foundation that helps in that regard.
Wow. That's amazing. And I'm a big fan. I think more Americans should travel abroad. I think that's something that as a country we're really lacking in. You go to Europe and the average person has been to, at least all the surrounding countries, and they're used to interacting with people from different cultures and things like that. Whereas here in the United States, it's a little less common. I did a lot of traveling in the late 90s, and it was so amazing. And it would have been so much better if I could have had like my wife with me or someone that I cared about, rather than just going. I was just going to shoot video.
Okay.
But it was like, wow, here I am, at the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. It's like, wow, but I love that idea about getting people. And Paris has always been one of those cities, never been. And I've always kind of romanticized about Paris from, Hemingway's Paris and the Paris of the 40s during the war, and just all these different things that I've seen, and I've always kind of wanted to experience Paris. So that's very cool. It's very cool.
Yeah. You're right. It's the artists. Some of my draw to Paris is the art that has come out of that place.
Yeah.
You mentioned Hemingway. Jim Morrison was a huge hero of mine growing up. Hence my desire to inebriate myself with drugs and rock and roll and women in my 20s. By the way, I did a series of photos that I'm calling the Morrison series. His grave, the apartment where he lived with his girlfriend at the time.
Wow.
The nightclub where he was last seen or known to be. Anyway, I still admire the man very much.
His grave is like just completely inundated with messages and stuff, right? Like
they clean it up often enough, but every time I've been to see it, and the last place I was living in Paris was right down the street from Père Lachaise, which is the famous cemetery where he is. But yeah, I hope that you get there. And if I'm there when you go, I would love to show you around.
That would be
It's such an
amazing.
amazing city.
There's nothing better than going somewhere with someone who's been there and knows it.
For sure.
The real city.
For sure, yeah, and that's what I feel like I was so fortunate to get to know. I had been once before I started dating my wife, which, by the way, was amazing. I was living in Los Angeles, and we had our courtship between Hollywood and Paris. So she would fly for 2 weeks to LA. I was living in Hollywood at the time, moved to Venice Beach, so she got to have that experience as well. And then I would go to Paris for 2 weeks, and that was our courtship until I shifted my business to give myself 2 months in Paris. I would work my ass off for a month and then go to Paris for 2, maybe 3 months. And
Wow.
and through my wife and her friends, I got to see a side of Paris that you don't see if you just go to spend time with the Eiffel Tower. And one of my favorite experiences that to me is so Paris is riding on the back of a motorbike with one of our friends. He's what you might think of as a typical Parisian, intellectual artist type, wears a sport jacket. He smokes, but he has ash like over here. But he's amazing, super intelligent, and so much fun to hang out with. And I'm riding on the back of his motorbike through, I think it was the first arrondissement, and we're no one's around, just hopping, one street after another, and it's foggy. There's this dense fog in the
Yeah.
air, and I don't know where he's taking me. We just see this glow in the distance of a cafe, and we show up residential neighborhood, but this cafe kind of quiet outside. You hear the dull roar coming through the windows, and then he opens the door, and it was alive. I mean, a jazz band playing. He knows
that's
the
awesome.
owner. They give us a table in the back right next to the band, and
like a
amazing
movie.
food. It's so much like a movie, but that's what I love. It's these little things. You never find that.
Yeah.
That kind of destination.
You really have to live somewhere. You
do.
have to live in a city to really get to know that part. Or, like you said, visit someone who knows it already.
Right.
Who can show it to you firsthand.
But that's the way that I've always liked to travel, and I'm curious how you traveled too. I think you were working, so they might have been
Yeah.
quick stops, but spending a month somewhere.
Yeah, so I did get to spend I spent a couple of months in Helsinki. It was in the winter, and we were living on a ship in the shipyard.
Wow, cool.
But I did get to experience that city, which was very interesting. That was really like my first trip abroad. And so, it's kind of a mix of the Russian influence and the Scandinavian influence. It was very eye-opening
interesting,
for
yeah.
me.
How long were you there?
I think I was there for a month.
Okay, yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah,
you sink in.
Yeah, and just to, and then we went back a bunch of times. I went back. I actually had 2 birthdays in Helsinki. My birthday's in February.
Okay.
So I had 2 birthdays there, and it was kind of cool to go back and go, oh, let's remember that little place that we found, and
Right.
when you go to try to find it, and I spent about 2 weeks in Barcelona. And we had the same thing. Like, we met some people, and they were locals, and they said, "Oh, you got to come." And we went to this. It was this little jazz club, but it was like somebody's flat. It was weird. It was like in the middle. We're just going into an apartment building, and then suddenly there's this jazz club, and people are sitting at tables, and everybody's smoking and stuff.
That's fun.
And and it was just like, wow, this is. And I came back on the ship like a month later. And I went and found the place. I couldn't believe I found it. I'm like, how did we get there? I think it's around here. I mean, I obviously couldn't do that now, but it was so cool. So I love that idea of visiting a place and getting to know the place, and then going back, and showing someone else like, this is a cool place we went. Not too many people know about it. So
Yeah, so this was on a cruise ship.
yeah, I was working for a cruise line, and we were going around. We were traveling the Mediterranean, shooting video of all the destination ports.
That's awesome.
And then we came back and did the ship.
Okay.
So we went to the places and stayed there, stayed in hotels. We had a tour guide and a driver, and they took us around and stuff. And I was always like, take me to where you would eat lunch.
Right,
Where
yeah.
you eat. Take me there. You know,
Yeah.
and I had a buddy of mine, or a coworker who was with me, and he was very Joe American, and he's like, I saw a Pizza Hut back there. I'm like, I am not freaking going to Pizza Hut in Barcelona.
Right.
No
Yeah.
way. You want to go? You walk yourself down there. I'm
I
going
have
to
a
where
friend
he's
who
taking
loves
us.
Starbucks so much, all throughout Europe. Starbucks.
Gotta get another Starbucks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. And I think that is, I mean, you were talking about growing up in Europe, people who grew up there and seen and been part of so many cultures. It's just the geographical issue with growing up in the U.S. You know, for a family of, well, you're a family of 5, right?
Yeah.
To go to Europe is so expensive, cumbersome, challenging.
Oh, yeah.
But going to Florida, you can pack everybody in a car and drive south in the winter for 2 weeks, and eat at the same Applebee's if you want to. Yeah. But that is one of the beauties of Europe. You can travel just as many miles, but go from England to Italy or something, something like that.
Yeah, no, that's my favorite part of it. We were in, where were we? We were in Genoa, and we were going to Marseille. And I remember they had booked our flights, and it was some convoluted flight to Zurich, and then we had like a 7-hour layover. I'm like, can't we just take a train? Isn't it like right there?
Yeah.
And it was.
Yeah.
We were like, all right. So we cashed in the tickets, and we took a train.
Yeah.
Which was amazing.
Yeah,
taking a train through Europe, through the coast, along the coast, was incredible.
It had to be beautiful, right?
It was gorgeous.
Yeah, it's so nice.
I was like, why would I want to fly, all the way to Switzerland and sit in an airport for 7 hours,
Yeah. And it's cheap. The train system. Yeah, we travel.
It was like $12 or something.
It's
ridiculous.
so cheap. It's great. My wife's mother lives in Burgundy, and we stay at her house often enough when we're there. But the train between Paris and Burgundy takes 2 hours. You don't have to drive, right? So you can do things on your laptop, talk, sleep, whatever. Yeah, and it's like 10 to 20 euros typically for that trip. It's amazing. Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, best of luck with that project. That sounds really cool. How can people, well, we've got your website up here on the screen. So that's where folks can get your work and buy your work and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's definitely a good place to start. If anyone's interested in Paris love affairs specifically, I'm still building out the infrastructure. I don't have the website up yet, but there is a YouTube channel, and I think it's paris.love.affair on Instagram. There's a Facebook page by that same name, and a group. I really want to create a group so people can give each other advice after having traveled there. So,
yeah, I mean, sounds like it could be a good podcast too.
Nice. Yeah, it could be for sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad that you came by today. You completely turned my day around, which is amazing. And I'm glad that we get to have this conversation, and I can't thank you enough for that photograph that you brought.
Yeah, thank you.
That's like way above and beyond what I would have ever thought. So I really appreciate that, and I hope people will go to your website and see some of your work. It's just astounding. You're a really talented artist and a hell of a nice guy, and I'm so glad that we got to connect today.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. I really appreciate doing this, and some of my interest was your love for Rochester, which I could perceive from the outside, and so I was like, this is a guy who isn't talking about crime, the politics, whatever, right? But like, what is right about this place? And I love it, not only because I grew up here, but I've come back after going to many places, and I see the beauty that you see in it.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
I'm not even from here.
No.
Everyone says I'm doing it backwards. They're like, you're supposed to start here and end up in Florida. You're going backwards. I'm like, I don't know. I love this place. I love this. I love the community and the people in it. So
yeah, and you're a good part of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much.